The metal skin of the Earth defense ship tore apart as it fell from the sky. Commander Teo gripped the controls with both hands, sweat running down his face as red warning lights flashed all around him. The planet Krell 9 was not supposed to look like this. The scientists had said it was a dead world, empty of life. But as Teo looked out through the cracked window, he saw mountains made of black stone and valleys filled with a mist that glowed like poison. The ship screamed as it fell faster. Teo heard the engines burning behind him, their sound like the cry of a dying animal. He had maybe 30 seconds before they crashed. He worked his fingers across the control board, trying to slow their fall, but nothing was working. The computer was dead. The left wing was gone. There was nothing left to do but choose where to die. Then he saw it. A valley with a dark opening at its side. A cave. It was a small target, almost impossible to hit, but it was his only chance. Teo pulled the ship's nose down and aimed for the black mouth of that cave. His hands moved on the controls even though he knew they would not help. His heart beat so fast he thought it might break. The distance to the ground closed and closed. 100 meters, 50, 20. The impact threw him forward against his belt. Metal screamed and twisted. The ship's body folded like paper. Sparks flew everywhere, bright and terrible. Teo's vision filled with orange light and pain. Then, as fast as it came, the sound stopped. The ship was still. Teo hung in his seat, breathing hard. His left arm hurt, his chest hurt, but he was alive. Around him, the darkness of the cave pressed in. The emergency lights flickered once and died. Only the small light on his wrist kept the black from being total. He freed himself from the chair and crawled out of the ship. The ground under his hands was cold and smooth, like polished stone. His breath came in small clouds in the cold air. Teo pulled himself to his feet and looked around. The cave was deep, so deep that his light could not find the end of it. Water dripped somewhere far away. The sound made everything feel colder. The ship was burning behind him. Small flames licked at the twisted metal, giving off smoke that made his eyes water. Teo watched the fire grow. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was also a beacon. If anything on this world was alive, they would see this light. They would come to investigate. And Teo did not know what lived on Krell 9. He moved deeper into the cave, away from the burning ship. His uniform was torn, and his left arm hung loose at his side. Moving was painful, but Teo had been trained for pain. He had been trained for many things. The Earth defense had taught him to survive when all the smart things would die, and Teo was still alive. The cave opened into a larger space. Teo's light found stone walls that went up and up, so high he could not see where they ended. The ground here was uneven. Rocks pressed up through the dust. In the distance, he heard something. Water. A river, maybe. Water meant life. Even in a cave on a strange world, water was a thing that made survival possible. Teo walked toward the sound. His left arm still would not move right, but his legs worked. His mind worked. That was what mattered. The cave twisted and turned, and Teo followed without thinking too much about where he was going. All caves led somewhere. All caves either led out to air and sky, or they led deeper, to the bones of the planet. Either way, they led somewhere. Then he heard it. A sound that was not water, a sound that was not wind, a sound that was alive. Teo stopped moving. He turned off his light. In the darkness, he could hear better. The sound came again. It was a voice, not human, not any kind of voice that Teo had heard before. It was rough and low, like rocks grinding together, but it was definitely a voice. He turned his light back on and moved forward slowly. Ahead, the cave opened into a wide chamber. And there, in the light of his wrist lamp, Teo saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. It was a creature. It was tall as the ceiling of the chamber. Its body was covered in scales that looked like armor. Its head was shaped like a lizard's head, but enormous. Its eyes were black and empty, and they looked at Teo without seeing him. Or maybe they saw him perfectly well. Teo could not tell. Teo's hand moved toward the weapon at his belt, but his arm hurt, and he knew that no weapon he carried would matter against something this large. Whatever this creature was, it could end him with one movement. One swipe of its clawed hand would be enough. The creature moved, but it did not move toward Teo. Instead, it moved away, back into the deeper darkness of the cave. The sound of its feet on the stone floor echoed and echoed. Then it was gone, and Teo was alone again. He waited. His heart was still beating fast. His breath still came in short gasps, but the creature did not come back. After a long time, Teo moved forward again. The chamber opened into a passage, and the passage led to another chamber. This one was different. There were marks on the walls. Not random marks. These were made by intelligent hands. These were symbols. These were writing. And then Teo heard the voice again. But this time it was different. This time it was smaller, lighter. It was coming from behind him. Teo spun around. His light found a figure standing in the passage. This one was smaller than the creature he had seen before. Much smaller. But it was the same kind of thing. The same scales. The same shape. But this one stood on two legs, and it wore clothing, tattered clothing. And when it moved with intelligence and purpose. The figure raised one hand slowly. It was not a threatening movement. Teo understood that much. The figure was not attacking. It was greeting. Or maybe it was surrendering. Either way, Teo lowered his own hand away from his weapon. The figure stepped forward into the light. It was smaller than Teo had thought. Not much taller than a human. Its face was different from the great creature he had seen. This face had more expression, more intelligence. It opened its mouth, and sounds came out. Not words, but sounds with meaning. Teo listened. He did not understand the language, but he understood the tone. The creature was curious. It was not trying to kill him, at least not yet. Teo lowered his hands completely and made himself look small and harmless. He was a human on an alien world, alone and hurt, in a cave in the darkness. But he was alive. And as long as he was alive, there was still a chance, still a possibility, still hope. The creature tilted its head and made more sounds. This time they sounded almost like a question. The creature's name, as Teo would learn, was Min-Hee. She was a scientist. She wore old clothes that were patched many times, and she carried tools made from stone and bone. When she first found Teo in the cave, she did not know if he was dangerous. But she was brave enough to speak to him anyway. She was brave enough to study him. Min-Hee brought Teo to a deeper chamber. This one was different from the others. This chamber was a home. There were beds made of woven plants. There were bowls and tools. There were books made from bark, filled with writing. There were other creatures here too, smaller ones, with the same scaled bodies, but different clothes and different ways of moving. They were afraid of Teo at first. They made sounds of warning and fear. But Min-Hee made different sounds, sounds that seemed to calm them. She spoke to them in her own language, and Teo understood nothing, but he understood everything. She was telling them that he was not an enemy. She was telling them that he needed help. Min-Hee looked at Teo's arm. She made sounds of concern. She brought water in a bowl and washed the wound. She wrapped it with cloth that was clean and soft. She moved with care and intelligence. She was a healer, Teo realized, or a doctor, someone who understood how to help. Days passed in the cave. Teo began to understand more of Min-Hee's language. He learned the word for water, the word for food, the word for pain. He learned that the creatures who lived in the cave were called Krellians, They were not the massive predators he had seen. Those were the rulers, the masters. The Krellians lived in hiding, deep in the caves, away from the light and from the eyes of their masters. Minhee explained things to Teo using pictures and sounds. She drew in the dust on the floor. She made the sounds of the great predators, mimicking their roars. She made the sounds of the Krellians, which were different. She drew pictures of the world above the caves, a world where massive creatures ruled, a world where the Krellians had no freedom, a world where life was constant fear. But then something strange happened. One day, when Teo was sitting alone in the chamber where Minhee slept, he heard new sounds from deeper in the cave, different sounds, heavier sounds. The Krellians who were in the chamber made sounds of fear and hid. Minhee came to Teo quickly and put her finger to her lips, asking him to be silent. The sounds came closer. Teo realized it was the great predators, the masters. They were in the caves. The Krellians held their breath. Some of them made themselves very small behind stones and piles of cloth, but Teo was too big to hide. He stood in the center of the chamber and waited. 3 creatures appeared at the entrance to the chamber. They were like the first one Teo had seen, but smaller, younger. Their scales were still bright and shining. Their claws were not yet fully grown. They were cubs, young predators, and they were curious about the strange creature that stood in their caves. The largest of the 3 cubs stepped forward. It made a low sound, not threatening, but questioning. Its black eyes looked at Teo, really looked at him, not as food, not as an enemy. Just looked. Teo did what he had been trained to do. He made himself look peaceful. He moved slowly. He made no threatening sounds. He was a human facing a predator, and his only weapon was intelligence and calm. The cub moved closer. It smelled Teo. Its nose, large and powerful, sniffed the human's body. The cub made more sounds. These sounds were different. They were curious and almost playful. The other 2 cubs came forward as well. They surrounded Teo, but they did not attack. They studied him. They touched his uniform with their claws carefully, as if they were learning what this small creature was made of. One cub touched Teo's helmet, which hung at his side, and the metal rang with a clear, bright sound. Teo named the largest cub Krell. It seemed like a good name. The cub seemed to like when Teo made the sound Krell. It made a rumbling sound back, which Teo understood was pleasure. Minhee watched from her hiding place, amazed. The other Krellians watched as well. They had never seen a human before. They had never seen the predator cubs act this way with anything, but there was something about the small human that was not threatening. Something that made even the mighty predators want to know more. Krell and the other 2 cubs visited the cave many times after that first meeting. They were young and curious, and the small human was something new and interesting. They played with Teo in a way that was gentle for creatures of their size. They learned that Teo made different sounds than they did. They learned that the human moved differently, with less grace, but with purpose. But the visits could not last forever. One day, Krell came to the cave looking different, looking worried. The cub made sounds that were urgent and fearful. It looked at Teo, and then looked back the way it had come. The great predators were hunting. Minhee made sounds of alarm. She gathered the other Krellians and pulled Teo deeper into the caves. They moved quickly and quietly, leaving their home behind. They knew that the predators could not follow into the deepest parts of the caves. The passages were too small for creatures that large, but as they disappeared into the darkness, Krell stayed behind. The young cub stood at the entrance to their chamber looking at Teo. The cub made a sound. It was not the playful sound from before, it was a sound of choice, a sound of decision. And then Krell turned and left, going back to face the hunters. Teo wanted to go back. He wanted to help the young creature that had shown him kindness. But Minhee held his arm gently and shook her head. There was nothing a human could do against the great predators. There was only survival. There was only hiding. There was only hope that the young ones would live to see another day. In the darkness of the deeper caves, surrounded by frightened Krellians, Teo sat and thought about the young cub named Krell. He thought about how a predator and a human had found something in common, not friendship, not yet, but the beginning of something. The beginning of understanding. And Teo realized something important. The great predators were powerful. But they were not the only power on this world. Knowledge was a power. Understanding was a power. And perhaps, if he was smart enough, if he was brave enough, he might be able to use these powers to change things on Krell 9. 3 months passed in the caves. Teo learned the Krellian language more each day. He learned to understand their fears and their hopes. Most of all, he learned that they were not helpless creatures. They were intelligent and creative. They had just lived under the shadow of the predators for so long that they had forgotten how to imagine anything else. The predator cubs kept visiting. After that first dangerous day, they returned. Krell came back first, alone, moving carefully through the shadows. Minhee was shocked to see the young predator return. But Teo was not. He knew that intelligence recognized intelligence. He knew that Krell had chosen to know the human, even though it was against the rules of predator society. Krell brought the other 2 cubs with him on the next visit. And then he brought more. Soon there was a whole group of young predators coming to the caves to see Teo and the Krellians. The cubs were growing bigger and stronger each week, but they remained curious. They remained kind to the small human and his alien friends. One night, when a storm raged above the caves and shook the walls with thunder, Teo realized something important. The young predators were exhausted. They had been hiding from their parents all day. They were hungry and tired and afraid. Their young bodies were beginning to feel the weight of the world they lived in. Teo had seen exhaustion before. On Earth, soldiers got this same tired look, this same heaviness in their eyes. He had learned that a human needed rest. A human needed sleep. And sleep was better in a comfortable place. He gathered what he could find in the cave. There were dried plants used for bedding. There were pieces of cloth from the Krellians' clothes. There were soft stones worn smooth by water. Teo began to build something. He built a nest. Not like a bird's nest, but a place that was soft and warm and safe. It took him hours. The Krellians watched and did not understand. Minhee asked him in their language what he was doing. Teo did not know how to explain. So he showed her. He lay down in the nest of soft plants and cloth. He made a pillow by putting the softer stones into a cloth bag. He lay his head on the pillow and closed his eyes. He made sounds of comfort and peace. When he opened his eyes, the young predators were staring at him with great interest. Krell approached slowly and sniffed the nest. The cub made a sound of question. Teo sat up and gestured for Krell to try. The young predator was suspicious, but curiosity won. Krell lowered his massive body into the nest of soft things. The moment the cub's exhausted body touched the softness, something changed in his eyes. The cub made a sound, not a roar, not a cry of pain, a sound of wonder. Krell laid his head on the pillow that Teo had made, and for the first time in its short life, the young predator experienced true comfort. The other cubs wanted to try the nest next. Teo and the Krellians made more nests, more pillows. Soon the chamber was filled with soft places to rest. One by one, the exhausted young predators lay down in these comfortable nests and felt what their harsh world had never given them before. Rest. True rest. Not just sleeping in fear while hiding from danger, but resting in a place that was made for rest, a place where care had been taken, a place where comfort was the goal. That night, the young predators slept more deeply than they had ever slept before. And when they woke, Something in them was different. They did not want to leave. They wanted to stay in the comfortable nests and feel that peace again. Krell made sounds to Tayo. Min-Hee translated. The young predator was asking if they could return, if they could have this comfort again. If Tayo would show other predators how to make these soft places. Tayo nodded. He had found something. Something that the predators valued even more than power or strength. He had found something that could change everything. Over the next weeks, more young predators visited the caves. The news spread through their young community. There was a place in the caves where you could find rest, where you could find comfort, where a human had learned how to make life more bearable. The young predators brought others. Soon there were dozens of young creatures visiting the caves, learning how to make pillows, learning how to rest properly. The Krellians began to understand what was happening. This human was not just trying to survive. He was changing their world. He was teaching the young predators something that might make them different from their terrible parents. He was teaching them kindness. He was teaching them care. Min-Hee came to Tayo one day and told him something important. The Krellians wanted to help him. They wanted to make more pillows, more comfortable places. They wanted to be part of this change. One young Krellian named Jae-Sung was particularly enthusiastic. Jae-Sung began to write about what was happening. The young Krellian created pictures and stories about the human and the pillow nests, about how comfort could teach creatures to be kind, about how rest could be a form of power. But not everyone was happy about these changes. One day, Krell came to the cave looking scared. He made urgent sounds. The other young predators who were with him made the same urgent sounds. They were all looking back toward the entrance. The adult predators were coming. The parents, the rulers. Someone had told them about the nests. Someone had told them about the human who was teaching comfort and rest to the young. The adult predators saw this as a threat, weakness, decay. Min-Hee grabbed Tayo's arm. They had to run. They had to go deeper into the caves. The predators would search everywhere. This comfortable place, this sanctuary, would not be safe anymore. But as they ran into the darkness, Tayo looked back at Krell. The young predator did not follow. Instead, the cub turned to face the sounds of the approaching adults. It was a choice, a sacrifice. A moment when a young predator decided that the dream of comfort and kindness was worth fighting for. Tayo wanted to stay and fight, but Min-Hee was right. A human could not fight the great predators. Instead, Tayo had to trust that what he had started would continue. He had to believe that a single human teaching about pillows and rest and kindness could be stronger than any army. The hunt lasted for days. Tayo and Min-Hee ran through the caves with dozens of other Krellians. They went deeper and deeper into passages so narrow that the adult predators could not follow. The roars of the hunting creatures echoed behind them, angry and determined. But they could not reach the fleeing group. The Krellians knew the caves better than anyone else. They knew passages that were barely visible. They knew how to move silently through the darkness. They knew how to disappear. And they knew something else now. They knew how to fight back. It was Jae-Sung who organized the resistance. The young Krellian warrior had become a leader. While Tayo recovered from the stress of running, Jae-Sung gathered the other young Krellians who believed in the change that was coming. They formed plans. They shared stories about what the human had taught them. They prepared to stand up to the predators. Jae-Sung came to Tayo in the safe chamber deep in the earth. The young Krellian warrior made sounds of determination and hope. "We will not run anymore," Jae-Sung said in the Krellian language that Tayo now understood. "We will fight. The humans showed us that comfort gives us strength. Now we will show the predators that we have strength." Tayo was injured from the running. His left arm, which had been healing slowly, was hurt again. His ribs were bruised. His heart was heavy. He knew that the young Krellians could not defeat the great predators in a normal battle. They were too strong, too large, too powerful. But Teo had learned something from running through the caves. The caves were a weapon. The darkness was a weapon. Knowledge was a weapon. And most of all, Teo had learned that the predators had something they were afraid of: change. The young predators had learned about comfort. They had learned about rest. They had learned that there might be another way to live, and the elder predators feared this knowledge more than they feared any sword. Teo stood up even though it hurt. He looked at Jae-sung and the other Krellians who had gathered. "We are not fighters," Teo said, "but we are teachers. We have something more powerful than teeth and claws. We have ideas. We have vision. We have the knowledge that life can be better." Over the following weeks, Teo and Jae-sung worked together. They created more comfortable nests. They taught more young Krellians about rest and care. They wrote stories and made pictures showing the difference between the old ways and the new ways. Jae-sung filled bark books with these stories, creating a record of the revolution that was beginning. But the work was dangerous. The predators were hunting. They killed some Krellians. They destroyed the comfortable nests whenever they found them. The elder predators declared that anyone caught helping Teo or spreading his teachings would be executed. They said that comfort was weakness, that rest was the beginning of death, that the ways of their ancestors were the only true way. However, something unexpected happened. Some of the young predators did not accept this. Krell and the other cubs had changed. They had felt the comfort of rest. They had experienced kindness from a human and kindness from Krellians. They could not go back to being purely creatures of violence and hunger. Krell, now growing into a young adult, began to secretly help Teo and the Krellians. The predator cub brought food when it was needed. It created false trails to confuse the hunters. It made sounds to warn the group when danger was coming. Krell was a predator, but it had become something more. It had become a bridge between two kinds of creatures. Then came the day when the conflict became open war. The elder predators discovered one of the hidden caves where Teo was teaching a large group of young predators about the benefits of rest. They attacked without warning. The battle that followed was not a battle in the normal sense. There were no great clashes of weapons, but there was fear and pain and loss. Jae-sung stood at the entrance to the cave and blocked the predators with the other young Krellian warriors. They did not fight with swords, because they did not have swords. They fought with knowledge. They knew the cave. They knew how to use the space. They fought with determination and courage, even though they knew they would lose. Teo protected the younger ones and led them deeper. Min-hee held his arm, helping him move faster. Behind them, the sounds of battle echoed through the stone passages, the roars of the predators, the brave cries of the Krellian warriors, the sound of a world changing in real time. They ran deeper, lower, further into the earth than anyone had gone before. And there, in a massive chamber that was so large it felt like being outside, Teo made a decision. He could not keep running. The predators would follow him forever. They would hunt him, and Min-hee, and all the young creatures who had joined his cause. There was only one way to stop them, one way to give the revolution a chance to grow. Teo looked at Min-hee and at the young Krellians and young predators who were gathered with them. He looked at their tired faces, their hopeful eyes, their belief that things could be different. "We stay here," Teo said. "This will be our stand." Min-hee understood what he meant. The other Krellians understood. They would create a final defense, one last comfortable place, one last sanctuary, and they would protect it with everything they had. Krell arrived before the elder predators. The young predator was bleeding from wounds received fighting its own kind. It came to Teo and made a sound that was almost like weeping. But Krell was not there to surrender. Krell was there to help. "I will delay them," Krell said in the mixture of sounds and body language that had become the common tongue of these unlikely friends. You prepare what you must prepare. Teo understood. The young predator would buy them time. Time to prepare. Time to make their stand. Time to show that a human, a group of Krellians, and a young predator could change a world. The great chamber deep in the mountain was silent now. All the young creatures had been sent to safety through hidden passages that only the Krellians knew. Only a small group remained with Teo. Min He was here, Jae Sung was here, and Krell had returned. His wounds bound with cloth, but his determination unchanged. The roars of the elder predators echoed from the passages above. They were coming. They were angry and hungry for revenge. They wanted to destroy this place. They wanted to erase the human who had brought change to their world. Teo stood in the middle of the great chamber and looked at the salvage from his crashed ship. The pieces he had carried down over the past months, the explosives, the metal, the tools from Earth that might work as weapons if he was careful, if he was smart. He had always known this moment might come. He had always understood that a human alone could not fight creatures as powerful as the adult predators. But Teo had not come to this planet to fight. He had come to survive. And surviving meant changing how others understood survival. Min-He came to his side. The Krellian scientist looked at the human with eyes that held both fear and respect. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Teo did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the chamber. He saw the comfortable nests that he and the Krellians had made. He saw the bark books that Jae Sung had filled with stories and drawings. He saw the young creatures sleeping peacefully, the ones they had not yet sent away. He saw a future that could exist if they were brave enough to create it. "I am going to teach them one final lesson," Teo said. "Not with words, with actions. I am going to show them that a human has a power they do not understand." He began to work. His hands moved quickly, arranging the salvage, placing the explosives carefully, testing the mechanisms that had survived the crash. Jae Sung and Krell watched, understanding that something important was happening, something final. Min He understood first. Her face changed. "No," she said. "You cannot." "I can," Teo said gently. "I must. It is the only way they will listen. It is the only way they will accept the change that is coming." The sounds of the predators grew louder. They were close now. Teo could hear them on the stone passages above. He could hear their claws scraping on the rock. He could hear their roars of hunger and anger. "Send the rest to safety," Teo said to Jae Sung. "Now!" The young Krellian warrior looked like he wanted to argue, but he did not. He understood. Jae Sung made sounds to the other Krellians, and they began to move the sleeping young creatures toward the hidden passages. Min-He stayed. She would not leave. "You must go," Teo said to her. "You must live. You must tell them what this moment means." "I will not leave you," Min-He said. Teo smiled. It was the smile of someone who had accepted their fate. "You are not leaving me. You are carrying me forward. You are carrying the future forward." Krell made a sound, urgent and afraid. The predators were about to enter the chamber. Teo activated the first mechanism. The explosives were not meant to create a massive explosion. They were meant to do something more precise, more careful. They were meant to bring down the passages, to seal the great chamber, to create a wall between the hunters and the hunted. The stone rumbled. The ceiling of the chamber began to shake. Dust fell like snow. The passages above started to collapse. The elder predators realized too late what was happening. They tried to retreat, but the stone was faster. Min-He was crying. Krell made sounds of grief, but they did not try to stop what was happening. They understood that sometimes a human's greatest gift is not comfort or kindness. Sometimes a human's greatest gift is sacrifice. Tayo stood in the center of the chamber and did not run. He did not hide. He waited as the stone came down around him. The last thing he saw was Min-hee's face, looking back from the entrance to the hidden passage. The last thing he heard was Krell's cry, the sound of a young predator mourning a friend. Then there was stone and darkness and peace. When the dust settled, the chamber was sealed. The passages above were gone. The elder predators were buried in the stone. They would hunt no more. Outside in the caves, Min-hee and Krell and all the others emerged from the hidden passages. The sound of the collapse had echoed through the entire cave system. Every creature, every Krellian, every young predator knew what had happened. They knew what the human had done. They knew that Tayo had sacrificed himself, not to defeat the predators through violence, but to end the violence, to make a statement so powerful that no one could ignore it, to show that the smallest creature with enough knowledge and courage could change the course of history. Min-hee held the human's helmet, which Tayo had left behind. It was the only part of him that had survived. She held it to her chest and made sounds that were both sadness and determination. "Tell them," she said to Jae-sung. "Tell every Krellian. Tell every predator who was touched by the human's teachings. Tell them that Tayo did not die. He transformed. He became the idea that comfort is not weakness. He became the idea that rest gives strength. He became the idea that all creatures, no matter how different, can learn to live together." Krell approached the sealed passages. The young predator placed one great claw on the stone and made a sound that was a promise. "I will remember," the predator said. "I will show the others. The human will not be forgotten." Above ground, on the surface of Krell 9, the world was about to change. The news of what had happened would spread. Some would mourn. Some would be angry. But some, many of the young ones, would understand that a new way was possible. The pillows had taught them rest. The human sacrifice would teach them meaning.